Good, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Evening guests, staff, counselors, welcome to the Tuesday, April 4th, 2023 Nipissing Township Council. Number one on our agenda, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest?
Yes, number
Okay.
14, please.
Okay, and Councilor Day, and that Councilor. Thank you. Number two, we have a delegation from Jacob Hanlon, Food Cycle Science, regarding food cyclers, food waste diversion programs, but we don't see him. He is there. Okay,
I am here, yes.
okay, great. Welcome, Jacob. And
Thank you very much.
the floor is yours, sir. Talk to us about the food cycle science.
Sounds good. Would I just be able to get the enabling to share my screen here, if that's all right?
Is it all right?
You should be good now.
Yep, that is perfect. Thank you. So I'm just
Thank
going to
you.
go through a bit of a PowerPoint here. Just want to start by saying thank you very much for having me on tonight. My name is Jacob Hanlon, and I'm the Municipal Program Coordinator at Food Cycle Science. And I'm really excited to discuss a food waste program diversion program opportunity with the Township of Nipissing. So I'm going to go over quite a bit of information here in a short period of time. So I just ask that you bear with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions after the presentation. So just to briefly speak about our company here, Food Cycle Science is a Canadian company, and we're based out of Ottawa, and we're 100% focused on food waste diversion solutions. We do this using our innovative technology called the Food Cycler. And our in-home food recycler is sold direct to consumers through partners like Vitamix and Breville, into classrooms through partnerships with some not-for-profit organizations, and then to municipalities through our Municipal Solutions division. Our municipal solutions help many small, rural, remote, and northern communities keep food waste out of their landfills. So we're currently working with 73 Canadian municipalities across 7 provinces and territories, from Nelson in British Columbia up to Hay River in the Northwest Territories, and then many communities in Ontario who often face struggles with food waste management or where green bins aren't necessarily an option. So the problem with food waste is that it is avoidable. It accounts for a large portion of our household waste, often a majority, and it's made up of mostly liquid, which is heavy and freezes in the wintertime. So on top of that, food waste in landfills is responsible for generating harmful greenhouse gases. And all these factors make it so that food waste is a problem that has a strong municipal impact. So one of the impacts to municipalities is that since food waste makes up such a large portion of our waste stream, it is causing our landfills to fill up quickly. Operating a landfill is costly, and we want to extend our lifespans of them for as long as possible. The environmental impact is that when organic waste is in landfills and it's breaking down, it's producing methane gas, which is many times more harmful than CO2. And to put that into perspective, taking 1 ton of food waste out of the waste stream, it's the equivalent of taking 1 car off the road for an entire year. In our communities, putting food waste in the garbage causes odors, which is obviously unpleasant for humans, but interesting for animals like bears and raccoons who like to rummage through our trash. And removing food waste from the garbage eliminates these issues, and it reduces the overall volume. So this can save on hauling and disposal fees, can save space in the landfill, and it can save residents on hassle and any excess waste fees that they might face. So we often get asked, haven't we solved this already? And there are green bins, which are common in big cities with high population density and the right infrastructure. However, this can be cost prohibitive or operationally challenging to implement. Now, many people in your community might backyard compost, and while we do think this is a great solution, unfortunately, it's not feasible for everyone. It's certainly not a year-round solution, and there's still the concern about bears and other animals trying to get in there. So then finally, the easiest solution is to continue landfilling our organic waste, but the long-term impacts here are costly and harmful to the environment. So at Food Cycler, we proposed a different way to deal with our food waste, which really focuses on making it very easy to deal with and right in our homes. Essentially, we built a small kitchen appliance about the size of a bread machine where you can put in your food waste, and this can include meat, poultry, fish, dairy, even some bones. You push a button, and then in a matter of hours, what you get is a dry, sterile, odorless, and nutrient-rich soil amendment that comes out. The machine can be used anywhere that has a plug. Most people store it in their kitchen or their basement or even in a heated garage. And the food cycle will process on average between 1 and 3 kilograms of food waste per cycle, with each cycle taking between 4 and 8 hours to complete. And it uses about 1 to 1.5 kilowatt hours of power per cycle, which is around the same as having a computer plugged in for the same amount of time. And then the result is about a handful of dry, sterile, and odorless soil amendment, which can be used in your garden, in an existing composting system, can be given to a local farm, or even processed with leaf and yard waste systems. So we currently have 2 solutions that can be used by residents in our municipal programs. Both machines are similar in size, but the FC30 has a 2.5 liter capacity, while the Maestro has a double. It has a 5 liter capacity. And we recommend the Maestro for larger households or for residents who produce a lot of food waste, but we ultimately leave it up to the resident to decide which model they would prefer. Now, I just want to emphasize here that it is a 4 to 8 hour cycle or an overnight cycle. And during this process, there's about a 90% reduction in the weight and volume of the food waste. And the end product is full of nutrients, and it's very beneficial to soil health and plant growth. And then speaking of the byproduct, with its many uses, most people will use it to fertilize their garden soil right at home, but it can be added to backyard composter. It could be integrated into a leaf and yard waste system. And what we also find is a popular option is to drop it off at a local farm or a community garden to bring its uses to kind of the wider community. Now, from an environmental standpoint, the Food Cycler is a net negative carbon solution. And what this means is that just like planting trees or using solar panels, when you use the Food Cycler to avoid bringing food waste to a landfill, you're avoiding more greenhouse gases than you're creating in the process. And the same can't necessarily be said for other municipal operations, such as waste facilities or waste and recycling collection services, which rely on a large fleet of CO2 emitting vehicles. In terms of the economic impact, this solution offers a return on investment by significantly reducing waste management costs. You're typically looking at savings of upwards of $100 to $150 per ton versus traditional methods that involve hauling and disposal. Now, one thing we've learned from working with our municipalities is that the residents are very interested in being part of the solution. They want to try new things, they want options, and they want their government to bring these things to their community. With the Food Cycler, you get to bring something innovative and tangible to your residents, and they don't need to live in a big city to be able to divert their organics. We believe that food waste diversion should be available to all Canadians, no matter where they live. And with the Food Cycler, we're reducing waste right at the source. We're focusing on, with no pun intended, what we call that low-hanging fruit. Because since food waste accounts for such a large portion of our household waste, it's the single most impactful strategy to achieving any kind of diversion targets you may have. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're working with several municipalities across Canada, and to date, we've completed pilot programs in over 40 municipalities and over 4,700 households. What we found is the results have been overwhelmingly positive. We've been able to achieve a significant amount of net new waste diversion. We have a generous user experience rating of 4.6 out of 5 stars and a 98% participation rate from the residents involved in these programs. So many municipalities have expanded their programs to more households within their community after the initial pilot program. And an example would be Nelson in British Columbia. After 2 successful pilot programs, they're now putting a Food Cycler in every home of their city of 11,000 people. So just a few more slides here before I wrap it up. Several months ago, Food Cycler was selected as a finalist in Impact Canada's Food Waste Reduction Challenge. And this is a 3-part initiative from the Government of Canada to reduce Canada's food waste. And as a finalist, we were awarded with a $400,000 prize and tasked with finding more Canadian municipalities as implementation partners. We're using this funding to invest directly into pilot projects at a heavily subsidized price. And these pilots are helping us move into the final stage, which comes with a grand prize of $1.5 million. And any future funding that's received will be used to invest into these programs for Canadians, and any municipality that partners with us will have the right of first refusal on any subsequent funding. Now, just to give a brief overview of the pilot program, it's a 12-week project. Residents would purchase a food cycler at the subsidized rate from their municipality. They would use the unit and track the number of cycles per week. And then at the end of the 12-week period, they get to keep the food cycler, and we ask them to complete a brief survey so we can evaluate the program's success. The results are then presented back to you in a final report or a feasibility study. And this data can be used to support any future waste management decision-making or to accompany a recommendation for an expansion to the program. The funded pilots work based on a subsidy model where Food Cycle Science provides an initial discount, and then we add the federal investment from Impact Canada, which gets the price of the unit down by 50%. We then ask the municipality to subsidize the cost by $100 per household, and the participating residents will then choose which model best suits their household and contribute the remaining amount. And then, as I mentioned, after the 12-week program or after the 12-week pilot, the food cycler is theirs to keep. And then just the last slide here before I wrap up, we have some pilot size recommendations. Basically, the minimum pilot size is 50 households, and these are just recommendations based off of our experience, whether it's 50 or 100 or a 200 household pilot. We are happy to adapt that and be flexible to ensure that it meets the needs in the budget of your municipality. So I just want to wrap up by saying that we'd welcome the Township of Nipissing as partners in this food waste reduction challenge, as we do believe that your community would be a great fit for the benefit of this program. Today, we kindly ask that you receive the presentation as information. And if there is any interest in partnering with us on a funded pilot program, we'd love to work with staff and bring a report and recommendation to council at a future meeting. So I just want to say thank you again for sitting through this. I know this was a lot of information, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I guess, and I tried to pay attention and everything. So the council fee is 100 per household. How much was it for the individual?
So for the smaller unit, the individual would pay $150, and for the larger unit, they would pay $300, and that's for a $500 and $800 retail price machine.
Okay. Now, I was here for the original kickoff, I guess maybe last year. I think, Councillor Kirky, were you here for that?
Yep.
Okay, so I've heard this and it's very interesting. Do any other councillors or staff have any questions that they would like to ask Jacob? Go ahead.
Is there any gassing off in the house or in the building that that this composter is working in? Because you're reducing the amount of material in it to a dry product. Am I correct?
That's correct, yes. So essentially the only byproduct that would come out during the process is some steam out of the unit. Because it is a process that takes up to 8 hours, there is kind of a slow stream of warm air with some moisture in it that comes out of the vents in the machine. Not enough to have any kind of buildup if the machine is near a wall or under a countertop, let's say. But the only, other than the end byproduct, which the food waste has turned into, it's just a bit of steam that comes out in the warm air throughout the process.
So there are no other gases involved, like methane or anything like that are mixed in with that vapor?
No, because with this process, because it's an aerobic process with oxygen being mixed in, there's no methane that's produced the way that it would in a landfill where it's crushed under pounds and pounds of waste and there's no oxygen getting to it. So when it's breaking down within this process, there's no methane that's emitted. And then each machine has carbon filters inside, which is essentially of charcoal pellets, and this filters out any kind of smell. So there's no smell with the process as well.
My other question would be, traditionally, do you put it out to a township first? They see if people are interested in buying it, or do you just buy it and then try to sell it from there?
Yeah, so we've had a mix of experiences. We've had councils approve a program on the spot after a delegation, although it is a bit rare. But in many circumstances, it's a bit more of a process where we can provide materials that can be posted on the town website or put out to the residents, and we can even establish a pre-registration program or a survey to just kind of gauge resident demand, because ultimately the factors that would get somebody to want to be part of this program can vary. And for some people who are interested in sustainability or reducing their waste, they would typically be interested. And we typically are on board with keeping the process slow at the start, gauging resident demand, and going from there.
Thank you, Steve.
You've been doing this for about a year now, right? Am I correct?
A few years now, yes.
Oh, a few years. Okay, so you must have acquired some historical data on the frequency that is being used per household?
Yeah,
Average.
so yeah, absolutely. So with our completed programs, with the survey that residents fill out at the end, they tell us how many cycles per week they did, and our average is about 4 cycles per week. And we know that with our smaller units, which is most common right now out in the households, each cycle diverts about 1 kilogram of food waste. So at 4 cycles a week, it's about 200 to 220 kilograms per year per household that's being diverted.
And that's at 1.5 kilowatts per cycle?
Per cycle, yes. Between 1 and 1.5.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So Jacob, I think what we'll do, if there's no other questions, we will, and again, we know some other townships locally that have done this, and we're going to reach out to them and see how they did it and how it worked. And we've got your information, and if we want to go to the, pre-registration plan or a survey, either way, we'll get back to you and see what we do, because as you say, people taking it on the first night is usually rare. We're rare, so we'll discuss it, and we most certainly will get back to you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you all taking the time to listen to the presentation.
Thank you, Jacob, and have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Thank you. You as well, Mayor and councillors and member of staff.
So locally, I think for sure Bonfield did this.
Yeah.
So what we can do is we'll reach out and see how it worked. Again, they're looking for $100 from township per unit.
I thought they were saying per
Pardon?
household, sorry, per household?
Yeah.
Per unit.
Yeah, and then $150 for the 500 and $300 for the 800. So
Yeah,
pricey, but that's something we can discuss when we get a little more information from our neighbors. And are there any other questions with this? Because if not, we'll move on to number 3 on our agenda, which would be committee reports. And as usual, I'll start with Councillor Young. Okay, and then we'll go to Councillor Foote.
I have a rec committee report for you. Last night we met for the rec committee. We welcomed 2 new members, so they were super excited to be with us. Got a lot of stuff coming up. Trivia update comes in May 6th. We're praying, we're hoping to get 21 teams. So the people that are, Kristen and her team are putting it together. It's $20 a team. We will have some snacks available there, or you can bring your own and have some fun. So the rules are in place, everything's in a go, and we'll get that up and running. Bottle drive update, we collected again last week. It was $256.40. It took us a half an hour from start to finish. It was absolutely phenomenal. I can't say it. We've come a long way in bottle drives. So really easy and painless. So it was a lot of fun.
And if I can interject,
Yeah,
we were going to say that we appreciate all the kids and the people that volunteered to help us, but Jillian's doing a great job with the landfill. She had it all cleaned up. I mean, we spent half the time pulling corks and taking caps off. That was all done. Bottles were sorted by color. So on her downtime, she's done that, and it's most appreciative. So if you'd pass that on, and I wanted to say it only to get it into the minutes and whatever. So thank her for us. And thank you, and apologies, Councillor Foot.
no, it's good. No, she's fantastic. It's made a huge difference. Easter, the scavenger hunt, we're ready to go for Saturday. We have 40 kids registered for the Easter scavenger hunt. On top of the scavenger hunt, we have a cookie decorating table, an egg decorating table, bag decorating for the kids, and we're just gonna have some fun and get some families together and have some fun for the day. It's gonna run about 2 hours, so noon till about 2, and if it lasts a little longer, that's so be it, and away we'll go. So it'll be good fun. Let's hope the weather holds out for us. Any way we go, we're gonna do it. Bat boxes, May 27th from 10:30 to 12:30. We're gonna do that in conjunction with the museum opening up and have some fun. So it'll be first come, first serve. Parents, we need to say thank you to them. They've done a lot of work and really helped and generously donated. So, and James is putting this all together. He's, what?
Is a registration.
This registration, I will do that. But okay, can't remember how many. I forgot to write down how many. There is a registration for bat boxes. So yes, once we're full, we're full, because there's no extras. So basically what James has done is he's put them all together and they're all in so a child will be handed that package and then they'll put it together. So that we're not gonna have to go fumbling for anything. He's done a really good job in organizing it. So once we're full, we're full. And then we'll do it another time. Storage building coming soon. So we managed to get ourselves a storage building for over at the Rank area, the community center, and that'll house all of our outside stuff that's going on over there. And, you know, whether it's the soccer nets and soccer balls and all that stuff. So that should really help and keep it organized. And we'll just, as a team, we'll keep it organized. And then we're not bringing stuff back and forth and trying to find spaces for stuff. We're gathering up a lot of stuff. We are looking at I don't know if we want to call it a teen dance or a youth dance, or a couple of our newer members are doing some legwork on that. So they're going to come back to us next month. There were some suggestions about maybe splitting up the ages. So like a 6 to 11 and then a 12 to 16 kind of thing. So we kind of hit all ages and have some fun with it. So we'll see what comes when they come back to the next meeting and see what we can come up with. Kind of floated karaoke, we floated music, we floated a little bit of things. So I think the kids might have some fun with it, right? And we'll need, what do we call them? Chaperones, yes, we'll need chaperones for that one. So it's good. The last thing on the agenda was we moved the time. So the meetings have been going at 7 o'clock and we moved it back to 6:30. So, which is perfect. Questions, thoughts? Did I miss anything else?
Well done. Good meeting, and you're making a lot of headway there. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Curtin.
I have nothing this week. I think on the next one, we'll have 2 committee meetings coming up this month. So,
And Councillor Butler.
Not this time.
Okay. I did have an East Home meeting. There was a funding announcement. March 22nd, there was hours of care funding announcement. So there's more money for hours of care, but you also have to produce more hours of care. Allied health and professional funding was increased from $128 per bed to $147. This would be physio, foot care, etc. And you'll see more about that at the end. Staffing, recruitment strategies continue. Still working with Nipissing, Canadore, CTS for staff, with 2 temporary foreign workers coming in May and 1 more, but there's no date yet. And even with the addition of the foreign workers, there'll be difficulty reaching the hours of funding targets. If you don't reach them, you have to give the money back. Community support services. Ontario Health is setting up new guidelines for all community service programs. Those are the people that have the seniors luncheons, driving people to appointments, the stand-up programs, the slip and fall programs, that kind of stuff. So that's all under community support services. Community service now has to supply rides or PSWs for people coming home from the hospital. If they don't have any, they now have stay on your feet classes in Kearney, and in Callender and South River, they have stand-up classes. So we're not there yet, but you know that those programs are out there if you need them. With construction, cabling project is complete, so now they can start installing the new security system in the phones. We're in receipt of progress draw 9, which means this month's bill was $70,000. And the next building meeting is April 13th. In contracts and compliance, quarterly and annual medical review. They had a safety drill. There was a workplace violence and harassment policy update. Nipissing Wellness Ontario Health Team. So everybody, before you were with a LHIN, now you're with an Ontario Health Team, and you have to sign a contract. And physio and occupational therapy are asking for new contracts because allied health provincial funding went up. So that's under review due to the funding increase. And the next meeting is April 26th. And the only other thing, really briefly, John Paul and I took in a OPG flood prevention meeting. Unfortunately, the one for the South River, Sturgeon River, and Wanapate was 2 weeks ago tonight. We were busy, so we had to do the Abitibi and the Matagami. The information was the same, just a lot bigger rivers and going in the opposite direction. But they just went over preparing for freshettes. And again, for those that don't know it, that's the rush or increase of water due to melt or rain in the springtime. And the other thing, they pointed out that in every case, there are operating ranges and applicable water management plans. That's not set up by anybody in our area, that's set up by the provincial government, and all they do is monitor it. So, and then they pointed out snow surveys of the 1st and the 15th each month. But filling up Lake Nipissing, the main factor is still rain. And again, reservoirs are drawn down, and Nipissing is a reservoir, and it's drawn down according to provincially mandated water management plans. And other than that, now we just wait for the first call, maybe next week, because I think things are going to start opening up next week, and we'll know what's going to happen as far as spring runoff. So that was the 2 meetings that I had, or we shared. And so if there are no questions, we'll move on to number 4. That's a resolution to adopt the minutes of the meeting held March 21st. So I need a mover and a seconder, Councillor Yam and Councillor Kirky. So it's number R202382, moved by Councillor Yam, seconded by Councillor Kirky, that the minutes of the council meeting held March 21st, 2023 be adopted as published. All in favor? Okay. Now, as you go along, I know this number 5 is on our agenda for the last meeting, but it was deferred because we had to advertise it on our website. So we move on to that, and that is a bylaw to stop up, close and sell part of the original shore road allowance. And so we have a gentleman here to speak to that tonight. If you would like to take the floor,
Just right
just
here.
right there would be
We have a
fine.
camera, so this is videotaped and the camera will follow you.
Now, I was told 5 minutes. Do I do this like a presentation form? There's a lot of it's questions. So if we can just do it like that and then.
Strictly presentation.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Okay, thanks everyone for hearing me. Good to go? Yep. The area in question, I've decided to dedicate my voice to the residents of Nipissing that are yet born, to eliminate any kind of selfish motives or anything like that. So I'm looking at the future generations. I don't know Mr. Gardner, but my wife and he have had communications over the past few months and have no indication other than he is amenable to the public interest and open to being part of the solution at that particular area. And my main objective tonight is to enshrine the public access through the road allowance to at least some of the public lands at the water, which is pretty much already 80 or 90% there. There's already a path on that public land. I'll just read this so for our viewers at home. The area in question is comprised of an open road allowance reserved in perpetuity for the public to adjacent shore road allowances, which are currently in the public realm, and 2 parcels of private land. The water adjacent to the shore allowance is a sheltered shallow bay offering shelter from wind and waves to canoeists and hikers for thousands of years as part of the ancient living and trade routes between Georgian Bay through the French River and Ottawa through the Mattawa and Ottawa rivers. And cottagers have also used the area for some decades. I'm a little concerned with our procedural issues when it comes to shoreline divestment. Only adjacent private land owners are able to make any kind of comment or objection. We have some issues obviously with advertising that were rectified. There was one other thing though, the Almaguin News. We advertised in the hard copy, but not on the website. And I'm just wondering, does it cost that much more to publish it on the web or do we expressly tell them not to put it online? With the explicit clause in the agreement, the final agreement that's not signed, we talk about motor vehicle traffic, but there's no talk about travel from water, which is exactly what the shore road allowances were intended for way back when. So these are considered highways. The shore and road allowances are considered highways in the Municipal Act. So in talking with the CAO, there was some confusing things, and we had a meeting in person and some communication back and forth. So there are some things that were a little confusing in our communication. Some of the things that she told me was that these lands are owned by the municipality and not the public, that the shoreline is not a public access, that the reason the Crown gave the municipalities the allowances was to sell to adjacent property owners, and to my wife that she couldn't in good conscience recommend public access through the road allowance. I'm assuming, for the neighbor or, for the private property owner adjacent, which in this case, Mr. Gardner has no problem with that. and would be part of that solution. So I would, some of the questions I'd like to ask council was consideration made to the official plan sections 4.4 and 4.8, which is cultural heritage and natural heritage features and possible future public uses. Our strategic plan seems like we are trying to all collectively come to a solution. Here we've got something right in our strategic plan that community amenities can be anything from roads with easy access to highways, parks, and green spaces, trail systems, public beaches, etc. So it looks to me like, the public interest is a lot more than just, can somebody drive, on that? Is it going to block my driveway? Can I build a bigger house than not? And my last concerns or questions, I guess, to council, were there any considerations made of provincial interests in coming up with the decision to, stop up the land in question? So like I say, I'm not against necessarily that this section of land gets sold to Mr. Gardner. He has said that he wants to be part of the solution. Perhaps in the goodness of his heart, if he does sell it, or so if we do sell it to him, he might be able to, do a conservancy easement, which is all the rage for people nowadays. Maybe we can allow people doing a 1,000-year journey on Lake Nipissing by canoe, as a heritage thing, that they'll be able to pull the canoe up and not get chased off the land, with a shotgun. But again, like I say, the unopened road allowance as of now, we are, it's basically a parking lot at one end of it at the water that is only accessible through private land now. So we have a private parking lot, a private boat launch, and only those members of the public can now use the unopened road allowance as opposed to the shore allowance. And now there's an easement going to be written into this shore allowance. So it just seems to me like we could have some more thinking to do about it. If at all possible, I would recommend that instead of, I'm not here to say let's squash the whole thing, but if it were possible to defer it to a later date where we could actually go out, measure up everything. I was out there a couple weekends ago. It's 2 feet of snow. We can't even measure anything. The stakes are, half buried. Maybe we can let John Paul out of the office for a couple hours, and I'm sure we could round up some other volunteers. I would volunteer myself. I know Mr. Gardner would be part of the team, and we can maybe put together a solution for this area once and for all. With all interests, being considered, including the provincial interest. So that's all I have to say, and I appreciate everyone listening.
Did you want to just show council where the broken lot is?
Sit from back here. So the road lines leading from Birch Grove down to the water is here. This is the area known as Party Rock that's been in question before. This is Mr. Gardner's lot and our road allowance.
And Mr. Gardner's lot again is
Right here,
right here.
and they have another one here.
So the, where we go down from Birch Grove, that's over here.
Yeah, that's not, the road allowance leading to water is not for consideration. It's not being closed.
And so this lot isn't over where the rock is. It isn't where the parking lot is. It isn't where the private property is. It's over here where Mr. Gardner is. So it's a totally separate
In
location
front of his house.
in front of his lot. So just to clear that up, it's not where the ramp is, it's not where the beach is. It's to the south of that, okay?
And to clarify your point, Mayor, that would be where the best, I'm proposing a footpath. So, everyone calls it Party Rock. If we just have a footpath there, we've got a huge municipal lot across the street. That would eliminate pickup truck loads of beer being, and I've been going there 5 years. I've never seen a party, but anyway. The northern portion of that unopened road allowance leading to the two shore allowances is already a clear path. Right now, the private owners can use it as a parking lot where then they can, there's actually canoes parked there right now too. So they use it to store, canoes and use it to park and then walk across, to the islands. So just to clarify. Anyway.
But again, this, where the canoes are, is not the property that we're looking at tonight.
No, just adjacent, that's right.
It's adjacent. So what we're looking at is Mr. Gardner's property, or as we have here, broken lot 11, concession 18, parts 1, 2, and 3. So that's what we have to look at. This discussion tonight isn't over the rock, the parking, the beach, or the ramp, okay? We don't own that property. Another entity owns it. And when they ask us, I'm not sure when, earlier this year, to sell the shore road allowance, we did not sell it, okay? This is totally different area. And so I thank you for your presentation. And because we have seen this for almost a month now, I think where we're looking, we're able to make a educated decision. And it's up to council to decide if you want to do this. And what I will do then is I will read the motion and put it to a vote. So I need a mover and a seconder. Okay, Councillor Yam and Councillor Butler. Okay, it's number R 2023-83. It was moved by Councillor Yam, seconded by Councillor Butler. And as they all say, that we passed bylaw number 2023-25, being a bylaw to stop up, close, and sell part of the original shore road allowance in front of broken lot 11, concession 18, designated as parts 1, 2, and 3 on plan 42R 21854 in the township of Nipissing, district of Parry Sound, read a first, second, and third time and passed this 4th day of April 2023. I'll ask if there are any comments or questions. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Carried. So any further discussion will have to be made with individuals and Mr. Gardner, because this is now his property. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll move on to number 6. Oh, sorry. Number 6, and I think you've all had a chance to read this as well. I presented this to the mayor of Powassan 5 days ago, 6 days ago. I gave him a heads up. We have since sent him the documentation. We haven't heard a word. Not a word. I asked that it be put on the agenda tonight, and they didn't put it on. Said they thought with the group being there tonight, it would probably not be a good time to have that discussion. So it wasn't put on the agenda, and we haven't heard anything at all. So what we're asking is that that you authorize myself and the administrator to sign a financial agreement with the municipality of Powassan as part of the ongoing negotiations. I don't know what else to do. We've pretty much tried everything, and short of incurring all the price ourselves, and we have voted that down clearly. This is what we think is the best alternative, and we have vetted it through our lawyer, who is also their lawyer, and our auditor, and they hope that Powassan will take the time to review it, perhaps after they meet with, the contingent tonight, and maybe they will rethink this, but at present, we haven't heard anything. So I'll ask mover and seconder, and Councillor Kirkby and Councillor Foote. And we continue to try to work something out here. So it's number R 2023-84. Moved by Councillor Kirkby, seconded by Councillor Foote, whereas in negotiations with the municipality of Powassan regarding boundary road construction, it is apparent that it would be beneficial to both parties to complete the construction and enter into a payment agreement for the costs. And whereas a draft agreement has been provided to the municipality of Powassan for review and discussion, now therefore we authorize the mayor and municipal administrator to enter into a financial agreement with the municipality of Powassan on behalf of the township of Nipissing. All in favor? Carried. So we will continue to try. So now we get to number 7. That will be this package that was in front of you. And excuse me, and I saw Jamie there, and Patrick. Patrick, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, Patrick, planning 101 training for council. And I'll turn it over to you, Patrick, and we have the first slide on the screen.
There you go.
Fantastic. Thank you for everyone for having us. Jamie's going to kick us off. Can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, everyone also has a printed copy because it's a bit far from where we're sitting. So we
Okay.
gave everyone here a printed copy as well.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Good evening, Your Worship and councillors and Chris and JP. It's good to see everybody tonight. If there's an issue with my audio, just let me know. I know sometimes with Zoom, for some reason, my computer doesn't pick up it the best, and I can switch mics. So just let me know if I cut out at any point. If you'd like to just flip to the next slide, what Patrick and I would like to do tonight is just give council a bit of an overview of planning and why we do it, and some of the things to look out for in your term of council. I know it's old hat for some of you, but it'll be a refresher for you, and then for others it'll be sort of brand new. There's a whole bunch of information in here. That's why we decided to provide it as a presentation that you can take away. But we'll give you a lot of material tonight, but we'll try to hammer home what some of the key points are that related to planning. And just as an introduction, Patrick and I have been the township's planning consultants. Gosh, I'm not sure how long, but for quite a number of years. And we've helped the municipality process a number of applications. Yep.
Jamie, the audio is a little bit bad on this end. Yeah, it's like a little bit robotic. It's not your natural. It's skipping in and out a little bit.
Let me try. Is that better? I just tried. Is it cut off at the end of my speaking? Is that what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it
It's
still
choppy.
doing?
it's out there.
Is it still doing? It's fading out.
Still cutting out.
Okay, just bear with me 1 second. I'll try something.
Okay.
If it doesn't work, then Patrick will have to do the whole thing.
Good work.
I'm ready.
Just let me try something.
Well played.
Try that. Is that any better? Is it still cutting out at the end? Test. Is that
That's
cutting
right.
out
That's good. Yeah, it's good.
better?
Better.
Okay. If at any point it gets choppy, just let me know and Patrick can take over. This is old hat for him. So why do we plan? We really plan to protect the community's values. So social, economic, environmental values. So those are sort of the 3 pillars that you find throughout your planning documents. And those are the things that we try to protect within the community. Those are the things that you value the most. So it's really planning helps protect the value sets that the municipality has and that we find within the township. We're really trying to plan for long-term success for the township from those 3 pillars, both from your social and lifestyle perspective, economic success, and then also from a natural environment perspective. And that those all interrelate with one another as well. I've always sort of the last bullet point here is I think what's most important. Planning, it's about recognizing the public interest, what that is. And I was always told in planning school that the public interest often are those that can't speak for themselves. So the public interest could be the environment, for example, or it could be people that aren't at the table. But what's the greater good and what's the big picture here? And then ultimately it's about effectively managing change. Change is going to occur, change does happen, but how do we effectively manage it to protect those values within the community? So that's the overriding sort of big picture principle of planning. Next slide, please. So in terms of the framework of planning in the province and why we have applications and why we have planning documents, it starts off by the provincial legislation, which is the Planning Act. That's the main piece of provincial legislation. We'll touch on some other provincial pieces of legislation that we deal with sort of on a daily and weekly basis, but the Planning Act's the key item. And then the province also has a couple other things. They have policy statements. So that's the provincial policy statement, which you'll hear about. So any recommendation that Patrick and I give, or any decision you make as council, is required to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. And then finally, plans. The province has a couple different plans. It has a growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and then where you reside, you have the growth plan for Northern Ontario. It's a document that doesn't do a lot from a land use planning perspective, I'll admit. It's really focused in the north about creating community hubs and areas for service delivery. So it's not that relevant for what the planning work that's done in Nipissing. It'd be more areas further north. From a municipal side of things, what we have is policies and then legislation. So it's a bit of a reverse from the provincial side, where the provincial is legislative and then policies. At the municipal level, we've got our official plan, which guides your decision making, and then we've got bylaws, like specifically your zoning bylaws, the most used tool we deal with in planning. And that bylaw sets out the rules for permitted uses, but sort of more importantly on a daily basis, it sets out the requirements that someone needs to meet in order to get a building permit. At the end of the day, that's what planning is all about, is obtaining building permits for things or land use permission. And we need to make sure that's not lost on us, is that all of this policy and all of this legislation all comes down to the ability to get a building permit, whether it's for a shed or a dock or a cottage or a dwelling. That's the purpose of it. Next slide. So here's the hierarchy. So this kind of puts in perspective what the last slide showed. So the planning act's at the top, and then you've got the provincial documents underneath it. And then in municipal context, you've got the OP and then the zoning bylaw. And then there's some other bylaws that we also deal with or from a municipal perspective. You want to go to the next slide, please? So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but from a provincial planning perspective, all decisions that you make as a council has to have regard to the matters of provincial interest. And what those are spelled out in section 2 of the Planning Act. So those are things like protect the environment, has to have regard to the environment, it has to have regard to municipal economic fiscal responsibility, protecting agricultural lands. Those are sort of things that are provincial interests that we have to have regard to. And then I touched on this previously, but decisions have to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Those are those documents that implement those items of provincial interest and then conform to provincial plans. Again, that really has very limited relevance for you folks. So that isn't something I would focus on, but having regard to the provincial matters of provincial interest and being consistent with the PPS, those are important considerations. And you may think when you're reading a report, like that's not what I think is right, or why the planners say this, or why they recommend approval or denial of this application. That's not what the community wants. Well, we also have to not only look at your official plan, but we have to look at what the provincial policy documents say. And we have to structure our planning opinion based on that. Next point. So just back to the Planning Act, what it does is it's that legislative document and it establishes the framework for planning in the province. So it sets out the requirements for municipalities to have official plans and that they have to have zoning bylaws. And there's some other tools in there that are listed here that aren't that applicable for you folks. But what it also does is set out a process to amend those documents. So you may say as a councillor, why are we even considering this application that somebody's made? Like, this is a crazy application. Well, the Planning Act allows folks to submit any application effectively that they want. So, but then there's certain requirements for whether it's complete or not, or whether it's provided the correct information, but anybody's entitled to make an application. So one of the messages here is that these planning documents are not static documents. They're evolving documents that evolve as new trends come about and as sort of we as a society evolve. But they're documents that sort of set a base starting point and set a framework. But as I mentioned previous, change does happen, and these documents are really about managing change. Next slide, please. Bill 23. So just a few comments on that. There's never been a point in history, well, planning's not that new of a thing. It's been around since since the 70s. It really started a little bit in the 50s, but came into fruition more in the 70s, and it's even newer sort of in the north. But Bill, there's never been a time in our history where there's been more changes to planning legislation and planning documents than now. It's a task for us as planners, and I'm sure you as politicians, to stay up to speed on things. So some of the changes that Bill 23 did, which was this is the Build More Homes Faster legislation, is previously individuals or neighbors or residents could appeal decisions on minor variances and consents. So minor variances are applications where someone wants to change the bylaw, but it's a pretty minor change. And consents are applications to create new lots. Those are generally what consents relate to. They can deal with easements and different things as well, but there's no third-party appeal rights on those applications anymore. So if you don't like the minor variance that is granted to your neighbor's property, you now have no ability to appeal that to the Ontario Lands Tribunal, which you did previously. That's a pretty major change to the act. So it's important that residents speak up at a committee meeting and that their comments are heard through that minor variance or consent process. Additional dwelling units, Bill 23 included legislation that requires municipalities to allow for additional dwelling units within their municipality where they have single attached dwellings, and not so applicable here, but if you had semi-detached and even townhomes, there's a requirement that municipalities allow for those additional dwelling units. And it's up to 3 additional dwelling units per property. So you can have an accessory building that has an additional dwelling unit plus within the main dwelling. So that's a pretty major change to the legislation as well. It also made a change to site plan control, which isn't, you folks don't use site plan very often, but site plan is now not a council approval. It's a requirement that it be delegated to staff, which previously council would approve site plan applications. They could be delegated to staff, but now it has to be delegated to staff. And then they also removed the ability to apply site plan control to residential developments of less than 10 units. So lots of shoreline-based municipalities in the province used to apply, or that have historically applied site plan control to waterfront development, and they can no longer do that. Where that was useful was if you wanted to include things like a vegetation preservation zone along the shoreline, where you identified on the site plan, these are trees or this is vegetation that's required to be protected. You could do that through site plan control. That tool does not exist anymore. We can still do that through zoning. You could, for example, if there was a sensitive feature like fish habitat along the water, we could say we're including an increased setback from development, or we're including a requirement through zoning where vegetation can't be removed. So it was just, site plan was a bit of an easier tool to enforce and police that. Next section. Are you taking over here, Patrick, or how far was I going here?
No, you got 3 more, I think.
3 more? Okay. Not off the hook yet then, I guess. Okay, so
4 more, sorry.
4 more. Okay, so PPS. So this is the document that I alluded to or identified previously related to the provincial document that establishes the framework for planning in the province. And it really, these 3 theme areas at the bottom are what's key. There's a theme area, which is part 1 that deals with building strong communities. Part 2 deals with resources. So that's the section that deals with things like protecting environmental features and protecting mineral aggregate or extraction resources and protecting agricultural lands. And then the last section 3 that's identified here, 3, that deals with public health and safety. So that's dealing with including policies and regulations for flood protection and those sorts of things. So, and protection from erosion. So we're not constructing houses and development in areas that could be subject to flooding or erosion. So that's the key elements of the PPS. Patrick will get into what you folks are going to focus on most, which is the official plan. So, the other documents, the growth plan that I mentioned, again, this is more of an economic development tool in Northern Ontario, not so much a planning document. It's very limited applicability, I would suggest, in Nipissing Township. It does provide some details about focusing growth to these service areas. I think it's really a document that if a community has a hub, for example, it might set them up for additional funding from the province, as opposed, by hub, I mean a location that's got jobs and places for people to live and education areas, for example, that or provides health services to a broader area. There may be a chance for additional funding, and that's really what it promotes. But again, limited applicability in Nipissing Township. Next slide, please. So just other provincial acts. I'm not going to go through them all, but these are acts that I'll let you read it. But these are pieces of legislation that sort of we deal with as planners on a daily basis and Chris and JP deal with the municipal act and sort of everything they do. That's the legislation that gives that the province basically has established municipalities and is sort of your Bible or operating procedure for how to run a municipality. So, but we've got all these other pieces of legislation that come into play through our through planning. Next slide, please. And then in terms of municipal planning, there's a couple documents that are sort of the focus, or a couple areas that are the focus, which are outlined in the slide. So official plans and zoning bylaws that I've identified. And then the applications that you kind of deal with most often would be the consent application, which is creation of new lots, site plan control, which would more likely apply to commercial development in your community, or and then minor variances that deal with amendments to zoning bylaws. There are zoning bylaw amendments and official plan amendments or plans of subdivision, which is for additional lot creation, but those are applications we don't see as much of within your township. Next slide. You taking over here? I got one more, Patrick.
I can take over here if you want.
Sounds good. All right, thanks.
Great, thanks, Jamie. And just this slide just shows a rough idea of how the planning process works within the township. So generally things start as a general inquiry or pre-consultation, or a formal application comes through the door. Generally it's John Paul that deals with it off the hop in terms of determining if it's a minor issue or major issue. Sometimes things are just handled at the township level before we're contacted, or if it's a more of a major applications, then we assist. So once the application's received, there's a lot more that happens once that is received in the door. Sometimes it has to be circulated to certain agencies. Most commonly, I think in the township of Nipissing, we circulate applications to MTO, for example, if the property fronts on a highway. So they provide comments before it reaches that staff report stage or recommendation stage. So applications are taken in through staff. MHBC assists as necessary in the process of that. And what at the end of the day, council or the committee of adjustment get a recommendation planning report that considers the legislation and the OP policies that we'll get into a little further here. I always characterize planning as a top-down approach. So what Jamie's covered already is the legislation that helps form your documents at a local level. So your official plan is a policy document. It provides policy direction to the township in terms of making decisions from a land use planning perspective or other perspectives. This document is fairly new. It was approved in 2018. And through this process, the plan was not just created by staff. It went through public consultation. It was circulated to the ministry, who provided comments. And interesting enough, the ministry actually reviews the final plan to confirm that the policies have regard for provincial interest, that they conform with those plans that Jamie discussed, and to ensure the policies are consistent with the provincial policy. So again, the official plan, it has to include those provincial policies and direction from a legislative standpoint, but the policy document allows the township to apply more site-specific matters and interests in a policy framework document. So again, it doesn't just have to apply to land use planning applications. It can relate to parks and public work investments, roads, capital projects, things like that. So what does the official plan include? It starts off with more general goals, and then it gets into policies. So in a residential designation within the township, the permitted uses are A, B, and C, and then it includes policies that help frame the development and character of areas. So other policies include servicing. Unique to the township is private services. General policies could relate to secondary dwelling units, now referred to as additional dwelling units. There's policies to protect natural heritage features. So if you're within a wetland or within adjacent to a wetland feature, it provides policy direction on how to address those concerns. That may be a more common theme that you see in planning reports. For example, if you're within 120 meters of a wetland of a certain size, I believe the township policies, the minimum wetland size is 2 hectares. So if you're 90 meters away from that feature, you would have to do an environmental impact study to demonstrate that there's no negative impacts on that feature. So that's a township specific policy. And here's an example. So one of the first things we do when we get a proposal or look at a property is look at the official plan mapping. You'll also see an example of the zoning mapping, but generally these layout areas of rural areas, settlement areas, and then protected areas within the township. So even getting more specific in terms of in regulations, the zoning bylaw was approved after the official plan when it was passed by council in 2020. And this is actually a legal document. So it dictates what you as of right or a landowner as of right can construct on their property. So if a dwelling's permitted and you meet all the standards of the bylaw, you can get a building permit to move forward. So the zoning bylaw establishes how land can be used, what's prohibited, where the buildings and structures can be located, what types of buildings, what sizes, and then setbacks and parking requirements. That's all covered off in your zoning bylaw. And again, here's just an example of the zoning, an excerpt of the zoning schedule. And just to provide an example, this is an excerpt of the zoning bylaw for the general industrial zone. What the standard format is, it includes permitted uses. So all of these uses under A are permitted within the industrial use. And then the bylaw will include a table that states if you do a repair garage, for example, you have to be a certain distance from the front lot line, the side lot line, the rear lot line. So if you're not permitted within this zone, that's when you have to look at a planning application to permit what you want to do if it's not a permitted use. And here's a list of applications that get processed by municipalities in general. What we at the township most commonly deal with are zoning bylaw amendments, minor variances, and consents. On a less common basis, official plan amendments may be required if something does not conform to the official plan, and then there's other applications that also can be processed at a township level. But we'll focus on the main ones tonight. So one of the more common applications that we've seen lately are consent, or commonly referred to as a severance. So the Committee of Adjustment in the township's case, you have members of council forming committee plus 2 members of the public. So what the Committee of Adjustment deals with are primarily land division. So when a new lot is being created, or an easement, for example, when an access agreement is required to provide legal access to another property. This application is, again, public. What comes out of approvals for a consent application is a provisional approval. So oftentimes there's conditions that have to be satisfied to ensure that there's certain items like a reference plan or payment of taxes that are covered off before that lot is actually created. So you don't really get approval that night, but rather conditions that you have to satisfy through the process. And again, as Jamie mentioned, under Bill 23, a neighbor can no longer appeal a decision on a consent application. Another common application is a minor variance. Just to provide an example, let's say a dwelling is permitted, but it has to be 5 meters from a side lot line. If someone wanted to construct that dwelling that's 3 meters from a side lot line, that would be a typical instance where a minor variance, a variance would be required. So how do you evaluate that minor variance? So in terms of the 4 tests, and this is under the Planning Act, you have to ensure it's in keeping with the intent of the official plan and the zoning bylaw. So you really have to think, what's the intent of a minimum setback? Well, the official plan is a policy document. Residential uses are permitted. So that's more of a higher test. What's the intent of a minimum setback in the zoning bylaw? Well, it's to provide spacing between buildings. It's to provide access to the side of a building on your property. So those are the things that are considered. And the 2 other tests result to desirability and is it minor? So again, that's just looking at a fulsome picture of the application. Is it in character with the area, and overall, can you deem based on the review of these 4 tests, is it minor? So again, application process is public. And again, you cannot no longer appeal, a neighbor can no longer appeal a decision on a minor variance. An official plan amendment, not as common. So when you don't conform to the official plan, so for example, if it's designated commercial in your OP and you want to change to residential, you would have to go through an official plan amendment. Oftentimes a zoning bylaw amendment would also be required, but again, you're evaluating at that point. If you're changing your policy document, you have to look at the provincial policies and the interest at that level in order to evaluate that change. And perhaps most common zoning bylaw amendments, if a use isn't permitted in a zone or all the standards cannot be met, sometimes an amendment's required. And the zoning bylaw amendment, you have to conform to your official plan, be consistent with the provincial policy statements, and then conform with provincial plans. So that's a key test. So if you change the zoning, you still must conform to your official plan, which includes general policies that guide land use planning within the township. And you can still, a neighbor can still appeal this. And again, there's a public process. So we didn't provide an overview of all the application processes, just so we focused on a zoning bylaw amendment. So in this case, again, an applicant, the owner would come in, pre-consult, and then submit an application. At that time, staff have 30 days to deem that application complete or incomplete. So what are we doing during that time? We're making sure there's no additional studies that are required in order to demonstrate conformity to those plans. But generally 30 days to deem complete and to schedule a public meeting. Once that goes out, you have to provide at least 20 days notice for the public meeting. Neighbors are circulated, and then you have the public meeting itself. You may make a recommendation at that meeting, or it may be deferred for a certain reason. But at that time, we work with staff to prepare a report and a recommendation. In this case, a zoning bylaw amendment goes to council for approval, so you would get a staff report. At the council meeting, a decision is rendered. If approved, staff have 15 days to send out a notice of decision. And then after that date, there's a 20-day appeal period. So again, a zoning bylaw amendment can be appealed by neighbors. If no appeal is received within 20 days of the notice of decision, the decision's final, and the zoning bylaw amendment would be approved. And Jamie, I think you're going to step back in here.
Sure. So we're just getting near the end here. We just wanted to include this slide because and make council aware of our duty and responsibility as planners. So I'm a professional planner, and as Patrick, and our responsibility in terms of the professional code of practice that we practice under is that we're required to consider the public interest. So although the municipality is our client, they work for their client, for the municipality, we're required to always consider what's the public interest in providing our recommendations to council. And that public interest is what's informed mainly by the provincial policies that we've outlined, but also the municipality's official plan. But we do have those responsibilities. So although we have a responsibility to our client, our primary responsibility is to the public interest. Next slide there, please. Just in terms of a summary and sort of key takeaways that I think you should take away from tonight's meeting. I know we've thrown a lot of stuff at you tonight, but first off, planning in the province is a top-down approach. So although it's implemented by you folks around the council table, and then by staff at the counter and in issuing building permits, we get our direction from the province, and it really sets the framework to undertake planning. So that's a key consideration. The policies and regulations at the township level, they are formulated based on considering those provincial interests, but incorporating them into a local context. So how do we apply those rules in Nipissing? So those rules and policies could be applied much differently in Nipissing than in Southern Ontario, for example, or in the city of Toronto, or in the county of Simcoe. So there's differences with geography at play, and different interpretations can be allowed. Some applications are more common than others. We wanted you to focus on that these minor variance applications and consent applications are the ones that you'll see the most. Pretty rare that you'd ever see a plan of subdivision or an official plan amendment or something like that. That the official plan is an important tool. If you find yourself not able to approve an application that you want to approve, you're sitting there saying, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. How come, or I want to approve this, how come the planning report says something different? Well, usually it's coming back to the official plan. So what may need to be done if you see a trend where planning reports are going one way, but your focus either individually or as a council is in another direction, well, it's time to look at the official plan. Can we update the official plan, and should we update the official plan to match what we'd like to achieve as a council, or what you'd like to achieve as an individual councillor? And then what's important from the zoning bylaw perspective is the zoning bylaw provides as of right permissions. You can change the zoning bylaw, you can amend the zoning bylaw. And the zoning bylaw standards that are included, they're provided for a standard lot. As we know, particularly in rural areas and shoreline areas, every lot is different. Every lot has unique characteristics associated with it. That's why it, in many instances, is appropriate to amend the zoning bylaw to deal with those unique circumstances. So we often get folks that say, we've got the bylaws, everybody needs to follow the bylaws. And certainly the bylaws are there to provide a starting point, but it's those unique considerations that need to come into play, is that every parcel of land is not created equally. They each have distinguishing factors. Next slide, I think that might be it. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. So sorry, that was a long presentation. There's a lot of info there. You've got it to take home with you or to refer to if you ever want to. And then, but if there's any questions, Patrick, I can do our best to try to answer those. And if you think of anything after the fact, we're around whenever needed to answer your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie and Patrick, wherever you may be. In my case, it's a great refresher, and I'm sure it was excellent for any of the new counselors that just had questions, whatever. The only question I had on the very first page, parkland dedication.
Yeah. What is that? Is that what you want to know?
Yep.
Sure. So as if a lot's created, so if you do a consent application to create a new lot, in accordance with the Planning Act, the municipality can ask for parkland dedication as part of that. So what the municipality can ask for is, it's section 51 sub 1 of the Planning Act. And so you can ask for cash, or 51.1, you can ask for 5% of the land area, or you can ask for cash in lieu of parkland. And many municipalities will establish a cash in lieu of parkland bylaw. So what that would be is a bylaw that prescribes how much money you want to take, or how you're going to go about obtaining parkland if there's a consent application. So I'll give you an example. In Ormodonte Township, they have a parkland bylaw that says, don't quote my numbers here, but it effectively says, if you're going to create a lot anywhere in the township's going to take $1,500 cash in lieu of parkland. If you did a 5% calculation, and what the 5% is, it's 5% of the value of the land, like vacant land, not with structures on it. So usually that calculation is going to come out a lot higher than $1,500, but that township said that's an appropriate number for us. Other municipalities' parkland bylaws might say, we're going to take parkland, or we're going to take cash instead of parkland, but we're going to require the applicant to do an appraisal of what the land value is, and we'll take 5% of that appraised value. So an approach like Ormodonte gets rid of the hassle of undertaking an appraisal. And then where does that parkland cash and lieu get used for? The municipality could effectively use it to purchase more parkland or upgrade their existing parks, for example. So that's what that parkland file is. That's what the reference is for.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, Jamie and Patrick, thank you ever so much. I'm sure we'll be seeing you in the near future.
Yeah, sorry we didn't make it up there tonight, but I think our wives appreciate us doing it virtual tonight. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you. Good
Thanks,
night.
guys.
Thanks.
Thank
See
you.
Have a good evening.
Take care.
Okay, moving along. I'm not to spill my water. We get to number 8, appoint a member to the cemetery committee. And we had one opening and we had one application. So I need a mover and a seconder. Counselor Kirky and Counselor Foot, thank you very much. So it's number R 2023-85, moved by Counselor Kirk and seconded by Counselor Foot, that we appoint Tom Marchant to the Township of Nipissing Cemetery Committee for the remainder of the council term. All in favor? Unanimous. Welcome aboard. This came from our last one where we said we donate to the Omagwin Learning Center. I need a mover and a seconder, Counselor Yam and Counselor Butler. It's number R 2023-86, moved by Counselor Yam, seconded by Counselor Butler, that we donate $100 to the Omagwin Adult Learning Center for programming. All in favor? Carried. Okay, the next one. As Jamie's pointed out, and everybody else lately, including our auditor, and I know John Paul's run into this, we've all seen that planning has become huge. Anything we go to do now, what you could usually do in one thing, you do 30 times. We're going to come to that a little later in correspondence, which is sore spot for me. So last year, for example, one property might have 50 calls on it. That's 50 times a staff member has to answer the same questions and go through everything. And there was a lot of property moved. And because of that, our workload has gone up. The number of reports that we have to deliver to the government has changed, whether it be to the auditor or whomever. So what we're looking at is to submit an application to the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation for the Workforce Development Stream for one intern position. Okay. And I think if you looked at the application, and they have, and said it was well done, and we'll take it from there. And monetarily, if you want to add.
On page 2 of my staff report, it explains that the program provides up to 90% of the eligible costs. So there's a maximum of $35,000 for the 1 year, and using our current structure for wages. The estimated costs for the total position that we're recommending is $53,126.32. So that would leave $18,126.32 to be covered by the municipal budget between when we get the intern and the following year. So it'd be split up between the two. And right now, for example, we have the municipal manager position open. It closed yesterday. We only received 3 applicants. So we may want to look at resubmitting that. So this would be a great opportunity for us to look at filling that position as well with this intern. But they have a budgeted amount of $18,000 for that position now. So we'd be able to cover it in our budget without any
So the person would be manage the museum
Yes,
and
recreation has.
and recreation and then when the museum's closed, they work in the office. And we have them for a year at no additional cost to the taxpayer, or I think.
It's in
14
our budget already,
Yeah.
so it's.
So it's there, and I know the museum has looked at having somebody for longer term and not necessarily kids, so this, you're gonna get somebody that's gonna be here for a year. So you have better continuity is our belief. At no extra cost. And that's the key here.
Yeah.
Well, it's my key, you may have other keys. So if we look over that, this is gonna come up, so we apply for it,
Yes.
and then we wait and see if we get accepted.
Now, they've told me it goes rather quickly once you submit the application. That would be my hope, because we need someone for the museum starting in May. So if we can move forward with it, hopefully we'll have an answer.
So I'll ask for a mover and seconder, and again, are there any questions with this? I know, again, we get the information and you've looked at it, so I'll ask for a mover and seconder then, Councillor Kirky and Councillor what? And it's number R 2023-87, moved by Councillor Kirky, seconded by Councillor Foot, that we authorize the municipal administrator to submit an application to the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation for the workforce development stream, the one intern position. All in favor? Next, the newsletter, and I know we just got it tonight. Did everybody get a chance to look at it? You ready for circulation? Is there anything you wanted to add, delete?
When you see those nice blue boxes, those are gonna be your lovely faces.
Oh. I don't think we discussed that.
Well, the largest box is on the front.
Yeah, well, I think we should be changing that. We saw that last week. Give you a second to check it out. Anything that you've seen, we need to add, delete, whatever? I know the rec committee, I think everything's in there that we had asked for.
Awesome.
And it is bright.
They can't say they didn't see this one.
Yeah.
I just got a copy of the day. Never got my tax bill. And it's on my dump.
Yeah. Okay, if we have nothing to add, I'll thank Kristen again. And, well, I won't thank her until we see how the pictures come out. They'll look bad, then it'll be the opposite. So a mover into seconder. Okay, Councillor Butler. Councillor Foot. It's number R 2023-88, moved by Councillor Butler, seconded by Councillor Foot, that we approve the spring 2023 newsletter for circulation as presented. All in favor? And it's interesting because we go to the next, which is council priorities for inclusion in the strat plan. This was one of the things that came out of the strat plan for 2 ago, that we needed more information, give more information to the populace so that they would have a better understanding, and, you know, so that's when we came up with the different messages and the different newsletters. So that's, you know, an example of the strat plan in motion. Which brings us to number 12. And this is great. I thought we were gonna have to argue and try to find these. Everybody handed them in. So that's just excellent, because we were gonna discuss them. We don't have to discuss them tonight because they're all in. And what they'll do is, some people, you'll notice they're all included there. Some have rec, 5 times rec, so it'll only go in once, and not next meeting, but the meeting after this. We'll go over it, because some things are determined by provincial law, believe it or not. That's why I asked about parkland,
Yes.
because I'm looking at parkland can't be disturbed, can't be disrupted, can't be, if it was given for parkland, you can't just sell it, you know? So that was a question I had, because I thought I remembered that from the past, but I wasn't sure. So the staff will go over all of these. We've all got the list there. And one thing that we were asked for before was, is it measurable? And that's where we're gonna have to look at some of these, because I put down enhanced recreation. Well, how do you measure that? If we have one team dance, have we enhanced recreation? So those are the things we have to look at. But we will do that 2 meetings from now.
Yes, and we'll try and put it into a table format, so it's easier for us to work forward with as a group.
And then we will go through it together. So not tonight. And the other reason is there's quite a bit on tonight, so we'll keep moving along. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have scheduled the dates for the open houses that we would like to have to discuss the strategic plan draft and also the changes to the land. So Amanda Community Center has been booked for June 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. I will email this to council as well. And the Township of Nipissing Community Center will be on July the 4th from 6 to 8. So they'll be relatively close, but once we're into the summer season, and we'll have hopefully more of our tourists in the area.
So Commander was when?
Commanda is going to be June 28th. And we have booked the hall and we're all set. Now, we can't live stream from Commanda due to the bandwidth issues and the internet issues there. So what we will do is we will record the meeting and we will place it on our YouTube channel the next day.
And this is where we will welcome public input and ever. And let's hope things change between now and then. So, again, and said that, we'll move on to correspondence. And first thing, it was number 1 on a week ago's, and it was, we asked staff to give more info on the Environmental Assessment Act. And this is what we got. The posting is for information only. No policy is being proposed at this time. And Ontario intends to consult at a later date. So that was last week, about 2 weeks ago, and we didn't even know what it was. Well, we still don't know what it is. But they're going to consult with us later when they decide what it is.
Will they know what it is when they consult?
I certainly hope so.
I'm starting to have doubts.
Okay, now, number one, request for support from the Blossom District Union Public Library for Story Walk. I know Councilor Kirkman mentioned this, and it's $50, and we say we'll do it, but we put it in next week.
I'll put a resolution in for the next council meeting, but I will prepare the payment if council wants to.
Okay, because I do believe the story walk is this month.
Yes, it is. That's why there's a bit of a,
So we'll do that. The second one, I see Tom has one in front of him. That's the Ombudsman's Ontario report, and we're not in it. Not a mention. So, as reported before, we're not on the Ombudsman report. And as indicated, again, by the book we received this week. So we heard this before, but now it's official, it's in the book, or it's not in the book, which is excellent. Number three, request for a donation from the Trout Creek Agricultural Society for the 2023 Fall Fair. We have supported that in the past. It's typically been $100 donation like we do for the Powassan Fall Fair, and the people in the south end, well, anybody and everybody goes to the Trout Creek Fall Fair. So if we're interested, we could put that on the next agenda. Good?
Yeah.
Everybody okay? The next one is an information item, and we heard this at the rec committee last night. And that's Community Community Center regarding the spring dance. And this is a requirement for licensing purposes. So they just make us aware of that. Next two. I have issues with, and I will try to convince you to have an issue with it too. Number 5 is a resolution from the town of Essex requesting the reinstatement of legislating permitting a municipality to retain surplus proceeds from tax sales. Last year, we had a tax sale. We sold a property on, I don't even know what lake it was.
Duncan?
Duncan Lake.
Duncan Lake. We had a multitude of questions, not only for John Paul and staff, but Steve had questions. And we do all of that for nothing. You don't get a cent, okay? That all went to the provincial government. It took a lot of time and a lot of energy, and what Essex County is saying is, you receive no compensation, but you do all the work. And so what my suggestion is, if we're gonna do all the work, we should be compensated for the work. So I would suggest that we support Essex County's thing that says, whereas whatever, that we're compensated in the future for anything like that. And I put it to council and whatever you think.
Absolutely.
I move that we back at Essex County. Actually, I wrote that on it when I read this, because it was still stinging me.
Yes,
I believe I may have called Chris.
We talked.
Yeah.
yes, so
'Cause-
we will definitely put that down for support.
Absolutely.
Now, the next one's interesting because as somebody said, well, we don't have gas, as in Enbridge gas in Nipissing, okay? But this came from the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors. Enbridge is gonna do gas locates, but they want $200 for every locate, okay? That won't affect us because we don't have gas, but as soon as Enbridge does it, Ontario Hydro is gonna say, I want $200. Then Bell's gonna want $200, and it's just gonna go on. So all of a sudden, you're $800 or $1,000 just on locates. So I think, again, we should support this. Again, I open the floor to you.
Absolutely.
May I make a statement
Yep.
regarding this? So I gave this some thought. Most of those easements are on public property that they are basically freely handed over to these companies. Okay, these large corporations. So I'm suggesting we take this to AMO, that we enter into an agreement with Enbridge or any other utilities that we will waive the fees for the use of the municipal right of ways if they agree to free locates. Because there is nothing out there that says that we can't start charging them a fee for the use of our public lands.
Right. No, I think
I'm
that's
looking at this, when it first came out, it was a safety issue. Call us before you dig, please. It's a safety issue. It's a safety. And I remember back in the Barry building, you know.
Mhm.
But when I look at this, they've gone beyond the safety thing, and I think it's a corporate grab. That's what I think it is. Because it's not a safety issue anymore. And if they want to do a corporate grab, these are public lands that their utilities are on. And we have freely given them those lands to use. They don't own them, to use as a public utility. So as a public utility and using those lands and gaining corporate financing from those lands, I think they should do it free or pay a fee for those lands, one or the other.
And Chris, look into it and we'll come up with something for the next meeting. And we're all in agreement that.
It's another one that burnt me.
Yeah,
We've
we're
got to
slow
stop
burning
reading
on
these
too.
things.
Okay, so. A motion to accept the correspondence. Okay. Turkey. Counselor Cook is up, her foot has already fooled us tonight because she has to leave when we do the accounts.
Well played.
Counselor Turkey and Counselor Young, but it is small. So it's number R 2023-89, moved by Counselor Turkey, seconded by Counselor Young, that we accept the correspondence as presented. All in favor? Carry. So as we move to statements, Counselor Foote, if you could leave the room, please. I need a mover and seconder. Yeah. Counselor Butler, and somebody's gonna have to bite the bullet because she left. Okay, Counselor Kirky, thank you. Just looking in that direction. Does anybody see anything there?
No, nothing jumped out this week.
Okay, so it's number R 2023-90, moved by Counselor Butler, seconded by Counselor Kirky, that the statement of accounts dated March 29th and 30th, 2023, totaling $62,765.90 be approved. All in favor? Carried. You go in the bathroom.
I'm not sure.
That's why I said go over
I
there.
know.
There
we go.
Okay, you can come out whenever. I didn't know what to say. If you don't- Yeah, okay, now, this is the confirming bylaw. And I need a mover and a seconder, Counselor M and Counselor Butler. It's number R 2023-91, moved by Counselor Yem, seconded by Counselor Butler, that we pass bylaw number 2023-26, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on April 4th, 2023, read the first, second, and third time, and passed this fourth day of April 2023. All in favor? Carry. And Last but not least, adjournment. Mover and seconder, Counselor Yim, Counselor Butler. It's number R 2023-92, moved by Counselor Yim, seconded by Counselor Butler, that the meeting be adjourned at 8:19. Okay, round up, 8:20 PM. Next regular meeting to be held April 18, 2023. All in favor? Unanimous. Carried. As always, I thank you. On reading and everything you do. Now,